If you're currently scrambling around your kitchen or wherever you're listening to this podcast trying to find a rogue insect, you don't need to look any further. Our musical intro today is actually a recording of today's topic, the black field cricket. You're listening to Scigest and I'm Erin Stroud, your host for today. I'm joined by Sophie Hunt and Warwick Simpson to talk about the call of the cricket and the exciting research they have been doing to come up with a new way to manage these pests in the field. So welcome, Sophie and Warwick. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah.
So Sophie, what do you do?
So I am an entomologist here at Plant and Food Research. I work in the biocontrol and insect rearing team.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Warwick, what do you do?
I'm a kumara grower based in Warwick, Northland. So yeah, I grow a lot of kumara, about 40 hectares.
Very cool. And how do you know each other?
We're married.
Dynamic duo. Very cool. Very cool. We don't often have husband-wife teams coming in on the podcast, so it's great to have you here. So tell me a little bit about these guests on my desk that our viewers can't see right now, but are sitting in a little container.
So they're black field crickets in this container that we've got here. They're a really large cricket that's not native to New Zealand, and anywhere Auckland North, you will be able to hear them now. They are really loud at night. They're a pretty cool insect, I think. Mm-hmm. But they're a pretty big pest for some kumara growers like Warwick here.
Right. If you kind of think of a cricket, like if you picture one in your mind, it's the one you're thinking of, really, eh? With these
yes, absolutely. Yeah, you might see the other smaller ones, the babilla little native ones. They look similar, but these ones are the really big ones that you'll see jumping and sometimes flying around.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's not often that people bring props in to our podcast episode, so thank you. It's great to have something to look at.
Excellent.
So they're a bit of a problem in your kumara fields, are they, Warwick?
Yeah, definitely. They have a habit of eating holes in kumara, which obviously reduces the value of that kumara. I tend not to be able to sell them as the fresh produce in supermarkets when they've got holes in them, so they have to go to like processed grades and shipping grades and things like that. And obviously we get less income for that kind of grade kumara.
I might be really naive in this, but I just thought crickets were like this beautiful, melodic, they used to sing lovely songs at night and didn't really do anything to the environment. So I was surprised to hear that there's such a problem in your fields.
Yeah, absolutely. More than just vegetables as well. Like, dairy and beef farmers, for example, have lots of problems with crickets in their pasture because they eat the grass. So there's certainly sort of a wide variety of people that want to control crickets to stop them eating their stuff, basically.
So what kind of level of damage have they done to your sites?
In the worst cases, I've had a couple of paddocks that really got obliterated, like every kumara was full of holes, and yeah, practically made them worthless. Luckily, only a couple of paddocks out of 20 or so. But yeah, and that doesn't happen every year, so that's good. But it's certainly an ongoing problem. And
is it getting like better or worse, or?
I think in the past it's been a lot worse.
Okay.
There have been times when basically see crickets under the streetlights in the street, and that was when it's really bad. You don't really see that these days so much, but they're definitely still out there. We sort of got them under control, but it's for a given value of control.
Right.
I think one of the issues is that they are really common in Northland, but what we're seeing is a slow shift southward as well as the climate's warming. So where they might not be a problem at the moment, they probably will be in the near future.
Something to be concerned about then if you're a forage grower down south.
Absolutely.
Scary. So what are we currently doing to control the numbers of these pests?
The most common control is cricket bait, which is grain with maldicin, like soaked in maldicin.
So that's a pesticide?
Yeah, that's an organophosphate.
Okay.
And so that's what your dairy farmers and beef farmers would use to put on the paddocks to control them. And as a vegetable grower, we also use that. But from kumara, we find that doesn't really do the job.
Okay.
Like it certainly reduces the numbers, but not enough to stop us getting damage in the crop. So we also use insecticides such as synthetic pyrethrins that we spray on, and also not specifically for crickets, but we also use methimidofos. But these are in the process of being phased out. Like for example, I picked methimidofos because that's going to be unapproved in 2024 next year.
Right. Okay.
So we need better ways to control it, basically, because already we'd like to control them more because they're still a problem and we're losing the tools that we currently have, so we need to find other ones.
Sure, yeah. If you've only got a couple of tools to actually manage these little critters and you start losing some of those tools, that could be quite scary from a grower's perspective.
Yeah, definitely a worry about the resistance that crickets might develop when you start reducing the number of things you're trying to spray them with.
Are there any other sort of tools that you can use that aren't insecticides or pesticides?
For crickets at the moment, no, not really. It's pretty weather dependent, so some seasons will be worse where there's been quite a damp season. Usually the crickets will be worse after that, so we might expect to see more this year. But that's why we had a chat and we wanted to come up with some alternative controls if we could.
Very cool, and I suppose that's why we're here today, to talk about these alternative controls. So I have a question that may be good or bad for your marriage. Who came up with the idea?
I did.
Sophie talked to me about this earlier, and my memory on it's pretty vague, but I feel like maybe Sophie came up with the what, and I came up with more of the how. So
love it.
It was definitely a team effort.
What a diplomatic answer. Well done.
I thought about the biology of the species, but Warwick was definitely the brains behind the tech side of things.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's also really cool because, you are a couple that's an entomologist and a grower, so you have this very, I imagine, quite a unique perspective on what the problem actually is. But often, as a scientist, I'm not, being mean to our kind, but sometimes scientists can come up with solutions that don't actually work in the field. So it's cool to have a grower on board to inform some of these decisions as well. So we're kind of alluding to this management tool, but what exactly is it? What have you guys been working on?
So it's an acoustic cricket trap. So we play the call of the male cricket in the hopes that all of the female crickets, adults that are around, will love the call, come flying towards this amazing male and be trapped in a bucket.
Right.
And then we can control them from there, either kill them or use them as chicken feed or use them for my colony or just basically not be eating the kumara.
Cool. So I suppose we're all probably pretty familiar with the idea that crickets make that chirping noise that we heard at the beginning of this podcast. But you're saying it's like a mating call?
Yes, it is. So only the adult males call, and they've got a call that brings the females towards them, and then another part of the call is basically to show off, to prove that they're the best male in the field and that the female wants to mate with them.
Right, very cool. So by removing the females from the population, that would stop new little baby crickets as
It
well,
would certainly
right?
decrease it. This
Yeah.
wouldn't be a tool for complete eradication. It would be one tool in the toolkit to decrease the population so that then maybe the baits would work more, or maybe some future ideas that we have would help control them even more.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's got other aspects as well, that if you've got a trap and you can see that you've started trapping crickets, then you know to go on and to, spray for crickets or things like that. It gives you a bit more knowledge about how the timing's working for the presence of crickets.
Yeah, almost like a little survey as well, of what's going on in your field at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so for this acoustic lure that you've kind of come up with, the theory behind it was based on the biology, but how did you turn this sort of idea or this theory into an actual thing that you have now?
Well, Warwick's got quite a lot of experience in sound engineering.
Yeah, that was part of it. So I've done some sound work in the past. So setting up recording calls in the lab here at Plant and Food.
How cool.
Was the first start. And
So you made a cricket top hits sort of CD out of crickets that you'd caught on your farm?
Absolutely, yes, that's right.
Wow. How cool. Cutting edge research here at Plant and Food.
Yeah, I like how you call them the top hits, because I know Sophie played them back to some females to see which they preferred.
I did. And there were definitely some that were much more popular than others.
Oh, okay. So crickets will have different calls.
Yes, they do. In theory, the strongest and most successful male will have the most attractive call, because the calls take some sort of resources to create, and so in theory a harder call would take more resources, so that male is stronger.
So where did these crickets come from?
Some of them came from our farm, but we also got some from John Hart in the cricket lab.
Yes, he kindly sent us a couple of shipments of crickets to start our colony, so we
I love that. I can just picture like the courier driver being like, what the hell is this noise coming out of this box?
Yes, it was very exciting unpackaging it and having hundreds and hundreds of crickets. So
very cool.
that was the start of our colony that we used for that, and we've started a new colony now, which is just sourced from Auckland and Northland, so we can do some more research just using really location-specific crickets.
Cool. So then you would have been comparing the cricket calls between lab raised and grown crickets versus wild ones?
We did end up doing that. So I recorded in total about 60 calls of all the male crickets, and then randomly selected a small number of those to play for the females. So the females were placed in an arena, which was actually a piece of guttering, a long piece of guttering from the farm, where I placed a speaker at each end of the arena and a female cricket in the middle. And I played 2 randomly selected calls at each end and basically see which way the female went.
Was there any difference between the lab versus wild crickets that you can remember?
I didn't measure that in the end. All I did was say, this is the most popular call, and those are the ones that we used in the field. I'd like to do more research and delve more into that and see if they've got a different dialect. So, for example, the Northland crickets versus Kokolda crickets, they probably have different dialects, and the females in the different areas will act accordingly. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know, this is my nerd fact for the day, that a study in 2006 showed that cows have different accents depending on their regional sort of area, and the person who did this study is an expert in bovine linguistics, which I just think is what a cool job title.
Wow.
That's great.
So you could be an expert in cricket linguistics.
I'll take it. I'll do
Yeah.
it.
Very cool. I didn't realise that cricket calls could sound so different, but you've very kindly provided us with a bit of a soundbite to show the difference in the cricket calls, which we can listen to now. So they really are really different, aren't they? You can hear the difference between what I'm assuming is different crickets.
Absolutely. And I think this season, if I can get more crickets, there'll be even bigger variation. Like that was only from 17, 18 male crickets, that variation there. We did, Plant and Food used to have a colony of crickets. They were doing research a couple of decades ago. And the woman who reared them said that the males in the colony would call louder when she was listening to some music over others. So I thought, well, why not try adding not just cricket calls, why not add some other music? So I've put some Tchaikovsky so that they could choose whether maybe it was Tchaikovsky that they would actually prefer over cricket calls.
Love it.
Yeah.
Here's a little soundbite of that song as well. So did they prefer the cricket or the music?
Oh, the cricket, absolutely.
Oh, really?
They ignore
Okay.
the music. So I gave the females the choice originally. Would they move towards a cricket call? And so at one end of the arena, I played a call, and the other end, I just had nothing. They would always move towards a cricket call.
Wow.
And then if I played 2 calls, one on either side, they could choose. And there was a strong preference. And sadly, Tchaikovsky was at the bottom.
Oh, no, we won't let them know. But I suppose that's the most logical way of figuring out the cricket top hit of the season.
Sure. For this cohort that I had anyway, and it might change.
Yeah.
And over time, probably the cricket call preference would change. So if this does become a product that growers can use, it would be really useful to keep on updating the top hits, because people's preference change, and so does crickets.
And also, like, what an awesome side hustle. You can just have a CD of cricket hits over the years. I love it. So now that you've found the top hit of the cricket, what did you do with it?
Well, I gave it to Warwick so that he could set up a device
You're like,
to
"Yep, my
create a
part's
cooler."
done.
The next part was setting up the trap, or more specifically, the electronics behind the trap. So we've got a microcontroller that powers a speaker playing the top hit of the crickets over that speaker, obviously on a set rotation, and we've had a few different versions that pick the time to play it. So obviously, because you want to play it as it's going into evening, through the night, and then into the morning, and you don't really want to keep playing it during the day because you're not going to achieve anything.
Yeah.
Because natural crickets don't chirp very much during the day, so we figure they know when they're likely to attract the female. So, yeah, the particular microcontroller I used is a Wemos D1.
Okay.
And that's just going through a really simple audio amplifier to power the speaker, and that's hanging down into a funnel that's in the top of a bucket.
Real high tech, love it.
Yep.
So we've got farm guttering so far, now we've got a bucket.
And yeah, with the speaker down in there, attracts them in, and then hopefully once they're in the funnel, they head down into the bucket and can't get back out. This is also powered by a solar panel and a battery, and yeah, so that's powering the microcontroller to produce the chirp.
And you just dug these into holes on your own personal farm?
Yeah, absolutely. For quite a while, I had one just outside the house.
Yeah.
This is near our seedbed area for the kumara. And yeah, it would play away every night. And the beauty with the amplifier is that the speaker's playing it a lot louder than normal crickets would to try and get the distance of the coverage. So yeah, we'd hear that every time we went outside the house.
Well, we're really encouraged not to take our work home, Sophie, but it sounds like you did exactly that with this project.
Oh, entomologists, you can't say don't take your work home. Our work is everywhere. It's fun.
So how long did you have these lures operating on your property for?
Well, this particular one outside the house, I had it running all winter. Not that I was expecting to catch crickets, but I really wanted to test how durable it was going to be.
Sure, yeah.
And so it, withstood some flooding and rain and everything else, and it survived quite well. So that was a really good result. But we also had a couple out on the farm running as well.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 blocks that we grow the kumara on, and yeah, so in total we've had 4 traps, I believe it is, running at various times on the 2 blocks.
And how did they do?
Well, when we were doing the actual experiment, so before we left these out here, we did an experiment to see if they would work, so I could measure the efficacy of it.
Get some data, love it.
Some data. So we had, for 20 nights, we had 2 traps per plot. One of them didn't have a call, wasn't playing a call, so we have a control just in case the buckets actually does catch crickets because they might have been interested. None of the control ones caught any crickets, which is really heartening. And we caught crickets in almost all of the other traps.
Awesome. That's a good result.
It is a good result. Not many, but this is just a preliminary experiment, so we've got a lot of stuff that we can develop and improve on as well over time.
That's cool. I've seen the graph that you made, and it looks very cool how many crickets were caught within, was it a 2 metre radius?
I think so, yes.
And then there were less, obviously, as the call was further away.
Yes, it's very effective, really close, which is fantastic, except that 2 metre radius is a small amount of a farm. So we've got some improving to do. But this was a really small sample size that we used the best call from. Maybe we can figure out how to actually synthesise an ideal call and catch way more crickets, or increase the volume, or catch them in some other way as well.
I'm picturing like a cricket call with auto-tune.
Yeah.
Which would be something to hear on your farm at night.
I think there is a lab in Australia that have looked into the actual call itself and broken it down and identified the parts that the female crickets react to. So I'd love to do some more reading of their papers and maybe chat to that lab and see what they can teach us.
Very cool. And you did some catch and release work as well, didn't you, for that preliminary trial?
That was for this. So we would know which proportion of the crickets we caught were actually the ones that we released and which were just random crickets that were already there, because it's obviously cricket season.
With a bit of concern on my part that we're actually releasing crickets onto the farm.
I can imagine, yeah. It's not the most promising thing for a grower, but all in the name of science. I love
Absolutely.
it. So what's next for this project?
Well, we'd love to develop a way of catching the crickets at a wider radius, because at the moment we caught at least 16 metres away. So the crickets that I marked and released and then caught again were 16 metres from the trap. I didn't catch any from 32 metres away. So we've got a diameter of 32 metres, which is great.
Yeah.
If we could catch the crickets, all of the crickets in that. So we'd like to improve the call, improve the catching technique. We took some footage, some videos of what was happening at the traps. We did notice a number of female crickets were attracted and didn't get caught by the trap. So we can definitely improve that side of things too. And
just to add some context, when we talk about a 32 metre diameter, for example, the length of the paddock that I grow in, it's normally about 300 metres. So obviously we'd love to increase that 32 to something more to paddock size, because, I mean, we don't really want to look at putting hundreds of these traps on a farm. We want to, would prefer to keep it to single digits.
But I suppose if you're wanting to use it as a a proper trapping lure, you do need to increase the catchment range. But if you're using it like a survey tool that you mentioned earlier, 32 metres sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, it's definitely got potential for that, yeah.
Okay, so what sort of, thinking bigger picture, what kind of impact could this lure trap have for growers in New Zealand and also beyond? Because crickets are a problem worldwide, aren't they?
This species of cricket is an Australian native, but there are many crickets worldwide.
Yeah, for thinking for the kumara industry, the impact of this would be incredible, really, if you really start catching a significant number of crickets.
Mm-hmm.
If, for example, spraying became a backup option and this caught the majority, that would be incredible, because this trap could run all the time, whereas we're always limited by how much spraying we can do and when we can do it and all that kind of stuff. For example, cricket bait, you're only legally allowed to apply it twice per season. And so if you have a trap running all the time, that's always going to be a massive advantage.
Totally, and I guess when we're talking about that idea of having a toolbox with things to be able to control these cricket pests with, if we're taking some of those tools out, like pesticides and insecticides, it would be great to be able to add some more in that were maybe a little bit more kinder to the fields, perhaps.
Definitely, yep. Yeah, it's always great to reduce the spraying, both from a cost perspective and, I mean, nobody really wants to put synthetic chemicals on their crops, so yeah.
Yeah,
because
totally.
another thing that spraying chemicals does is decrease beneficial insects, because there are actually a couple of parasitoids that might be able to help control the crickets in the future. So there's definitely a gap in the research there. I'd love to look into that more.
I've heard about these parasitoids. I think the one that I had heard about is in Hawaii, and it has caused a mutation in the cricket population that makes them purr instead of sing, which is a weird idea to me, to walk out into your kumara field at night and hear a bunch of purring. It would be quite strange. So who knows, maybe we'll get purring crickets in the future.
I wonder, well, hopefully we just don't have any.
Yeah, that's a better option.
The parasitoids that we have here are egg parasitoids. So this summer we will do a preliminary survey, see if we can find these parasitoids, see what kind of numbers they are. And ideally, if I could rear them in the lab, then we could use those as a tool as well, in addition to the cricket traps.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Because there's a big push for integrated pest management now, acronym IPM, so growers to not completely remove use of pesticides, but certainly to involve other tools to reduce that use of pesticides and have a more integrated control of pests in their crops.
How cool that you guys can be at the forefront of that as well, with making these lures and traps. And even cooler that you get to do this together as a couple.
Yeah, we're really lucky. We've had a lot of support. I mean, this whole project was funded by AgMart, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without them, so they're pretty integral to this whole process.
Well, thank you both for joining us today. It's been a pleasure hearing about the research you've been doing.
Thanks for having us. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been great to be part of it.
And thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts from, and you can also check out our website for more information. Also, a quick apology for those of you who clicked on today's episode thinking that you'd be hearing about cricket the sport rather than cricket the insect. Mā te wā!